100 years is an amazing period of time. If we close our eyes, what happened, what was the world like 100 years ago? So much has changed in the world. And interestingly, this 100 years is coming just a year before our own community is celebrating its own centennial. It was in 1913 that we built our great synagogue in Walmart Street in town, in Joburg Park, and more recently moved here to be able to continue the journey. And as a South African who grew up near this neighborhood, almost in this neighborhood, there were milestone events in my life that made me aware of the fact that there had to be a huge change in our country. It was at my bar mitzvah when I turned 13, and there was a photographer who was employed to take pictures at my bar mitzvah. His name was Eli Weinberg, and he played a huge role in the transformation of South Africa. And as a young man, I was aware of the fact that I could go to his studio to have my picture taken, but he was unable to come to the event where there was a gathering in celebration because he was banned from being in a public place. It was when I was 14, and if I can read it to you, I was moved to write a poem to the star. And if you will indulge me, it's only 3 verses, so I'm going to, if you give me the chance. It's a little one. I was 14 at the time, it was a year later, but I was very moved by that event, that there could somehow be the dishonesty and the inequality that was so evident in our country. In 1972, 73 it was, this was in the Star on the 26th of May 1973, there was an event where sport was played in South Africa, and a special concession was made that black would be able to play white. It was a jarring event at the time because it never normally took place. And I called it sport in the RSA. Sport was always open for the best, for the man who was fit and full of zest. But now not everyone has the right. Sport is only for those who are white. Thus from the Olympics we were unanimously banned. People even went as far as to boycott the Rand. Yet South Africa believed with all their might it was worth it to keep their sport all white. Both black and white together fought for the government to recognize mixed sport. Eventually came the day that for only one night history was made when black played white. I remember at the time how my father told me that the words of Madiba just prior him to going to suffer in his incarceration. My father sat me on his lap and he said the words that he taught and said at that time would be studied and would be learned in schools. They would become the philosophy, they would become the rationale, the thinking of a new country. At a time when it was disbelief. Nobody even thought anybody would hear of Madiba again, heaven forfend. 100 years has gone by. And it is a time that the Jewish community, as all the communities, have to pay tribute to 100 years of contribution to a change that took place in South Africa. 100 years ago, the ANC, the African National Congress, was founded at a time that South Africa excluded the majority of our people from a part that they could possibly play in our country. It was a time that the government sought to oppress and to squeeze out and to snuff out the life of anyone who had a capacity to speak for the disadvantaged and for those downtrodden. And against all odds, in exile and oppressed, the ANC survived all that it had to go through and grew in its power and its influence. And eventually it led the negotiated new South Africa, a transition to democracy, and became the first truly democratic government of South Africa. In 1994, the building blocks of nationhood were put into place, and a democratic culture emerged, and it included the Bill of Rights, the famous Freedom Charter. It established an independent judiciary, and it ensured that there would be freedom of expression, of thought and information. In 2012, South Africa's new democracy has turned 18 years old. In Jewish life, 18 means alive. Chai means it's alive. And it is a milestone, 100 years, that we have to think about what has happened until now, what contributed to the growth, to the development, to the endurance, to the ability to survive and eventually emerge victorious. But equally so, a milestone of 100 years is a time to lift one's eyes and to think of vision, to think of purpose, to think of a new meaning in a new environment, a whole new set of circumstances that have to be responded to, the maturity, the foresight to be able to look at life and find the goal and the purpose that lies ahead. A flame is an amazing thing. A flame is a tangible item in our world that flickers upwards. It always yearns for that which is above, that which transcends, that which is higher, that which is more than has been achieved until now. 100 years birthday means that we have to aspire to new heights and to new roads and to new purpose and to new meaning. And a flame is also something so unique. A flame is able to share of its own strength 1,000 times and more and not be diminished. Because when human beings are not just sharing items, physical items, when we redistribute that form of wealth, there has to be a diminishing. But when we speak from spirit and from soul, from heart, when we speak from our inner being, then what we give is not sacrificed, does not diminish us. We are only enhanced by the privilege and the opportunity to serve and to give. And my hope and prayer for South Africa is that we should unite. We should see the strengths in one another. We should appreciate the ability to include the various parties that have been elected democratically, and to see the part that we can play alongside one another, not as enemies, not as cross purposes, but as an ability to share the experience and to build the South Africa that we so yearn to achieve, every single one of us. I end with a song, not in Hebrew,